Hi, everybody.
Welcome to part 2 of our 9-day journey through the ecological teachings of the Gospel of St. Matthew. We are today going to talk about the first of the parables. And again, our guiding principle, as we explained in the first video, is ecology, not theology. And ecology is the principle of an oral peoples. A people with an oral culture have an enormous amount of wisdom and teaching about the natural world, about the plants, about the animals, about their relationship with the plants and animals and the land. For a people with a written tradition, so much of what we call information becomes stratified and
It's all about us, basically.
and all about us, and
Yeah.
it's all about our story, and it's all about creating niches of information that some people have access to and some people
Right.
don't. Because suddenly what you need are people who can read the scriptures for you
Right.
that you can't read yourself and to tell you what they mean.
And in a written culture, nature just becomes the backdrop for the human story, right?
And here's the interesting thing. Jesus was an oral teacher. And he was probably illiterate. He did not write down what he said. He was offering oral teachings, and the scripture that he was reading was the world. And that scripture is available to each and every one of us with teachings each and every day. So it's not that Jesus is offering us only 7 or 9 teachings from nature. He is trying to rearrange our entire relationship to what is spiritual teaching.
And what it constitutes the kingdom. He talks about the kingdom of heaven in his parables over and over again. But this is not what we think. It's not a human kingdom.
And the kingdom is more like the kingdom.
Yeah.
The kingdom, the web, as we're going to explore, of interconnected relationships that include us, but are not only about us.
Yeah.
Now, one of the problems when we come to these parables, many of which we think we know, is that they've had 2,000 years of priests telling us what they mean.
Yeah. And interpreting them from, to their own advantage, right, in an institutional way.
And to take these very profound ecological teachings, and instead of having them embed us further into the earth, take us out of the earth and use them as metaphors for theological teachings. Clark and I aren't going to do that today.
Yeah.
We aren't going to say this is about the church and sin and purity and attainment.
And Jesus didn't care a whit for for countries' institutions, right? He was a very anti-institutional teacher. If anything, he dismantles institutions and shows them to be illusory, right?
And so what he's teaching us how to do today is to read the scripture of the world we live in. So let's do that together.
This is one of his most famous parables, the parable of the sower.
There's 7 parables that make up the first 7 parables in the Gospel of Matthew. We're going to go through each one, learning how to do this, looking at what he's doing about how he is retraining us to read our place in the world.
Behold, a sower went forth to sow, and when he sowed, some seed fell by the wayside, and the fowls came and devoured them up. Some seed fell among the stony places, where they had not much earth, and because they had no deepness of earth, forthwith they sprung up. And when the sun came up, they were scorched, and because they had no roots, they withered away. Some seed fell among the stones, some seed fell among the thorns, and the thorns sprang up and choked them. But some fell on the good ground and brought forth fruit, some 30-fold.
No, some 100-fold, some 60-fold, some 30-fold.
Goes the other way. 30-fold, some 60-fold, some 100-fold. It goes up.
Here's the thing about oral scripture. You get to play with it. Oral scripture, we get to change, right? There's not one written way of doing it. I say it one way, he says it one way, tomato, tomato, but we still get there in the end. The important thing is 100, 60, or 30, or 30, 60, and 100 at the end. So let's take a moment with this parable, the parable of the sower, and look at what Jesus is doing with this first parable, because this first of all, it's been used as a metaphor to explain Jesus' teachings. Some people aren't going to get this. Some people are going to be stony ground. Some people are going to hear what he has to say, and they're not going to get it.
Some people are going to have hard, stony hearts, right?
Yeah.
That the message of the gospel can't penetrate.
And some people are going to have thorns, and they're never going to grow and become good. So this becomes a very judgmental, hierarchical, who's special and who's not kind of teaching from the church.
Right.
It's not. It is an actual lived description of what actually happens in the world. And let's talk about what's happening.
Right.
Because first of all, let's talk about seeds. Jesus is fascinated by seeds. Our Lady is fascinated by seeds. There's a reason they're fascinated by seeds. Seeds are what's called angiosperms. And angiosperms are the reason we're human beings and we're even here in the first place.
Seeds come from angiosperms.
Yes.
Angiosperms are seed-producing plants that hold the seed within them. And this is mentioned in the very, very opening verses of the Bible. This is how foundational these plants are. We are only able to have the bodies we have because of angiosperms, like roses.
Roses and these and wheat and barley and flowers, all of these are angiosperms. These are seeds that hold their wisdom within them and then come into bloom. But what happens with seeds? Well, Jesus is describing an actual wilderness experience. He is not describing agriculture. And that's the first thing we have to look at.
Right. So the sower goes forth, and he has like a bag of seed, right? And he's sowing. He's tossing the seeds out. We're not talking about a very, very deliberate sort of. He's not putting a hole in the ground, and dropping one seed in, and he's not. This sower is not practicing what we would call agriculture today. It's a much more looser, more.
Well, in agriculture, what would happen is you would plow a field. This is the transitional moment for us as a species. As civilization is built on this moment. A field is denuded of trees. It's plowed.
Doesn't have any rocks. Doesn't have any thorns, right?
And then the seeds are deliberately placed in careful ways, and then it's weeded, and then it's harvested. It's a monocrop. I often say that monocrops give way to monotheisms, give way to Monsanto. Right. So that's not what Jesus is describing. Jesus is describing how seeds are sown without agriculture.
Right. This is more permaculture than anything.
And how are seeds sown without agriculture? By the wind.
And by birds, by insects.
By the wind, the pollen, by the seeds, by the animals taking them in. And how does that sowing occur in the natural world?
Right. Well, it goes all kinds of places where it's needed. The seed that is scattered, so that it falls on
the wayside.
The wayside, right? This is for the fowls. This isn't like, it's not wasted seed. It's the seed that the birds eat, right? And the birds swallow and then excrete various other places. So those seeds are being further disseminated by the birds. It's all part of the process.
Some seed fell by the wayside, and the fowls came and devoured it up. That's nature's plan.
Yeah.
Nature plans not for all the seed to go to human beings. Some of the seed goes to the birds, and the birds take the seeds elsewhere.
Everything gets fed.
Everything is going to get fed. So the first thing that gets fed are the birds.
Right.
And the birds are going to pollinate the seeds with their poop, and that's going to be, if you don't have the birds pollinating the seeds, and you don't have your pollinators, we're not going to continue this process. Right. So Jesus knows that. Without any scientific degree, without any big ecological program, he's a country boy. He knows how it works.
Right.
It's important that the birds get their seeds first.
Right. And it's important also that the land be fed. What happens next is that some seed fell among the stony places where they had not much earth. Where how do you get much earth? How do you get soil? How is soil made? Soil is made by plant matter springing up and then dying back.
Springing up and dying up.
The stony places eventually get covered with topsoil through this process, right? So the seeds are not wasted that fall on the stony places. It's by design that the seeds fall on the stony places and
create.
Yeah.
Soil is created by plants falling on the stony places, by lichens, by mosses eroding the stony places. And what is soil if it's not the dead bodies of these plants that grew up quickly?
That's right.
So they're going to create a future place for other seeds to grow. This isn't a waste. This isn't a mistake. This isn't a waste of the seeds. This is the ecological process of the earth.
Right.
This is what happens. Some seeds, they're going to go to feed the soil. Some seeds are going to go to the birds, who are then are going to excrete and create more soil. Jesus is describing an entire ecological system.
Yeah, so we've got the birds, right? We've got the stony places. Next we have the thorns. Some seed fell among the thorns, and the thorns sprang up and choked them, right? Okay, let's think about that. The seeds that fall among the thorns, why do they fall among the thorns? Because the thorns are protected places for rabbits and mice and all kinds of small mammals and small creatures where they live.
And the seeds that fall among the thorn thickets
are eaten by these creatures.
Are eaten by these creatures, who are going to be eaten by other creatures, who are going to be eaten by coyotes and foxes, who are then going to create an entire ecosystem that works.
Right.
He's saying, like, look, the seeds are not just for human beings.
These parables were created by a person who is very, very much still in touch with the workings of the natural world. They were later interpreted by people who distanced themselves as much as possible through agriculture from the natural world. And they would tell you that the kingdom of heaven is only this last stage of the four, right? Where some seed fell among the good ground. The priest will tell you, the church will tell you, right? Science will tell you that this utilitarian approach, right, whereby the food that is grown, all the seeds, is for human beings, right, and for human cultivation. It is a human resource. It's to be designated in the good soil, these plowed fields, right, and it yields 30-fold, 60-fold, 100-fold, right? The whole idea is increase, right?
But here's the interesting thing Jesus says at the end. So some seed is going to fall on what we call, and you try to imagine Jesus around a fireplace telling you the story. He's not on a pulpit. He's sitting in a circle with you on the ground, out in the countryside. A campfire. And there are kids playing, and there are old women picking their teeth, and there are old men who've fallen asleep and are snoring, and he's telling the story. And he's probably telling it to keep everybody's attention with a fair amount of sense of humor. We've got to find the humor back in these things. He says, okay, so some seed does fall on, quote, the good ground. Ha! The good ground.
Right.
And the good ground is what we call good for human beings.
Yeah, what makes it good? Because it's good for human beings.
Good for us.
Right.
Look, the seeds that fell at the wayside were good for the birds.
Right.
The seed that fell on the stones were good for the soil. The seeds that fell in the thickets were good for the animals. Right. Now let's get to our good seed.
Right.
There's some for us. But even here, in the natural world, we are not going to get 100% yield.
Yeah, there are different yields. Some years it's 30%, some 60, some 100. Right?
Anyone who follows the natural world knows that the earth goes through cycles. Sometimes you have a mast year where you have acorns covering every surface of the ground, and then the next year there are no acorns at all.
But listen, and at the very end Jesus says, "He who hath ears to hear, let him hear." This is not something a person would say if this was an obvious story with an obvious message, right? He's not saying, I mean, everybody at this point goes, oh, I get it. Yeah, we're the good ground, right? Your disciples are the good ground. We are the people who receive the gospel, so forth and so on, right? Human beings are what's important. But he doesn't say that. He says, at the end, he says, this story is not what you think it is. Right? You must be careful not to interpret it only from your own point of view. No. Open your ears.
Open your ears.
Mind.
Look.
Open your eyes. Look about you at the world. Listen to the bird song. See the rhythms of these, of the seasons.
Absolutely. And know that it's not a mistake that some year you get 30% yield from your fields. That's just the way the nature is. Maybe this year the fowls are getting 70% and you're getting 30. And that's going to be better for you in these cycles. And that's what happens in the natural world. One year there are a lot of acorns, the next year there are a lot of bunnies, the next year there are a lot of foxes. And that's the way it works in the natural world. And that human beings are part of those rhythms of increase and decrease as well. Sometimes there's more, sometimes there's less, and the natural world is organizing this. Right. The agricultural world, the human world, the civilized world we live in is trying to get 100% yield all the time from every seed.
100-fold yield.
100-fold yield. Like we have modified the ground, we've modified the seeds, we've created these monocrops, and what's happening? The birds are dying, the animals are dying. Worst of all, 95% of the world's topsoil has been eroded. The way we're living has actually been completely out of line with these principles.
Right, no seed falls among the stony. The way we would have it is that no seed, falls by the wayside or falls among the stony places or falls among the forms. But pursuing this particular strategy basically creates a world that's a theme park for Homo sapiens, where even we ourselves can't survive in the end, right? Because we have depleted the world in which we live and the resources that we ourselves depend on, along with all other beings, for our health and our lives.
So I want to offer everybody a really radical takeaway from this parable, which is go outside today and get to know the teachings of the earth where you live. Get to know the weeds. Get to know the seeds. Get to know the trees. Begin to notice their cycles, not to interfere with them, not to clean them up, not to improve them, not to make a mess of them, but just to begin to notice what's happening. We are so out of touch with the weather, the moon cycles, the plant cycles, the earth cycles, that we don't even notice anymore when the sun rises or how the stars come out.
Do you know what the biggest difference between the teachings of Jesus and the teachings of Christianity are? Is that Jesus' teachings are outdoor teachings, and Christianity's teachings only make sense within four walls, right? You have to have those walls. You have to have the institutional structure for them to make sense. The moment you remove the walls, the whole thing falls apart. It doesn't make any sense at all. Jesus' teachings make sense because they are blended with the images from the natural world. They mimic the rhythms of the natural world. They tap into the deepest wisdom of the natural world. This is a person who taught outdoors constantly.
And he's saying, where do we belong? This is where we belong. Get back. What's really upsetting and what's really sad is 2,000 years ago, Jesus is feeling called to remind people of these teachings that 2,000 years later are more lost than he could possibly have imagined. He's giving these teachings in an age that still has not seen, nitrogen fertilizers and, mechanized farm equipment.
Or even plows, as we
understand
Monsanto today. Yeah, they used scratch plows back then. They would just, basically, when they did any kind of modification of the soil at all, it would be just to scratch the surface.
But it was still destroying who people were in relationship to themselves and to the earth. The kingdom is right here. The kingdom is outside in every weed, every plant. And if you're in the city, nature is there. It's no less there amid the concrete. In fact, I know an herbalist who says you want to get some good herbal medicine, go meet the herbs that are growing up through the concrete in New York City. Yeah. Those are tough weeds. Right. So get to know our plants, our fungi, our earth, our dirt. How does dirt happen? How do we need dirt in our lives again?
I'm reminded, just sort of wrap things up, I'm reminded of a Logion, or a saying from the Gospel of Thomas, right? One of the Gnostic Gospels, where Jesus' disciples say, where's the kingdom? And he says, the kingdom of heaven is all about you, but men do not see it, right? Spread out across the whole world, and men do not see it.
This is it. We're in the kingdom.
Yeah. He's describing the kingdom, right?
This is the kingdom. It's the seeds you see. The kingdom is the seed that falls by the wayside. The kingdom is the seed that falls on the stony places. The kingdom is the seed that falls among the thorns. The thorns are the kingdom. The stones are the kingdom. The birds are the kingdom. Yeah. Don't create these binaries of, otherness that we need to create a false Eden for ourselves. Right. We've been given it. We just have to go back outside and learn again how to read the scripture of the world that is available to every soul that is.
That's it. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you here again tomorrow at 11 o'clock Eastern Time.
We'll be talking about weeds. Okay. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.